Hello, listeners. I'm Layla Maghrabi. Welcome to Third Culture Therapy, a podcast that explores the ways culture and heritage impact our mental and emotional well-being. On today's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Ariana Alexander Sefre. Ariana is a British-Iranian activist, entrepreneur, and founder of mental health and music company Spoke. It's an innovative app that promotes mental health care through music and lyrics. Her business focuses especially on people who are underrepresented or who feel alienated by contemporary healthcare systems. Ariana has been awarded multiple times for her work, including the South by Southwest Innovation Award, WISE 100 Women in Social Enterprise, and the East London Innovator Award. Ariana, it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Layla. It's an absolute honor to be here.
So your startup, Spoke. It's a platform that uses music to help people's mental health, and we're going to unpack the ways it does that and the science behind it. But I want to take it further back to begin with, to before you founding the company, and understand more about your own professional background and what your experience with mental health was, if any.
Yeah, of course. So I moved back to London from New York in 2016 because I wanted to start my own business. And I actually started a wellness company called Sweat and Sound. We did live music, wellness, and fitness events. And I ran that for a couple of years. And I noticed it was very obvious that the world of wellness was incredibly exclusive. You know, you go to all these meditation, yoga events, you see the same types of people. And it really had a very exclusive culture, which I would argue it still does. And during that time, and I think it was in 2017, towards the end of 2017, early 2018, my younger brother really sadly then lost one of his best friends from suicide. And then I witnessed my brother and his friends, they refused therapy, refused counseling. I was working in wellness at the time, and it was very obvious that all these practices that I had very good access to were not relevant culturally, they weren't accessible to him and his friends, and actually to so many other people. So that's what started what I would say has now been, well, nearly 9 years of research. So I started really looking into what is going on in the mental health, I guess, therapeutic wellness spaces that are making these practices so inaccessible to so many people. And that's what I ended up focusing on with my research. So I did some research in my master's at Cambridge in social innovation. So I guess my academic background is looking at global systemic social issues, mental health being the focus. And a big thing that came out of my research was the power of using mediums like music, and seeing that it had this immense power to reach people that other practices, the government, the NHS just couldn't reach. So during that couple of years, I was really focusing on some of the most underserved communities I focused on London. So I was focused on young men, particularly people from like Black or global majority backgrounds, and also people with neurodiversity as well. So things like ADHD and autism, etc. So those were some of my focuses because they were more underserved within our healthcare system. And one of my research papers was looking at the role of artists to shape the emotions of their listeners. And that ended up, after a whole bunch of interviews, going to loads of gigs, looking at even like YouTube comments, etc. I found this positive correlation between the emotions expressed from an artist, even sort of interviews that they do, what they speak about in their lyrics, and the lived experiences, and even the social issues that people care about within their audience. If I care about said social issue, I'm going to like artists that talks about it. But that hasn't been used as a means to reach a lot of these people. So a big part of that is looking at, okay, how can I then take this to help inform potential, I don't know, policy or regulation. And so I was really looking at it through a systems lens. How do we solve this problem? Not just create solutions that will be an important but a band-aid on the wound, but how can I actually think about solving these problems in the much wider kind of systemic lens? Just to give you a really interesting stat, over the past 40 years, there's been a really steady increase of research papers on the link between music and psychology and, mental health. And, even, music and dementia care, music and Parkinson's. But in the last 2 years alone, that increase has jumped by 300%.
Wow.
So we have had a sudden, I guess, we've hit the tipping points. And myself and many other people who have started to understand this space have been predicting that this would happen. I mean, even like Einstein said numerous times that, music and vibration would be used as a medicine of the future.
Well, it
And
has been for not just the future. I mean, historically, for thousands of years, music has been integral to humanity.
yeah, no, of course. And I would say as well, there are different ways of listening to music for the purpose of, even relaxation, for sleep, overcoming anxiety. And there's passive and active listening. And listening passively when, for example, we're focusing or when we're sleeping, that is fairly simple to create and produce. It's, really quite ambient beats. We're looking at sort of not as much sound complexity, quite predictable rhythms. And there's lots of playlists that can offer that type of well-being support. And actually that has a very, very strong purpose. And I use it as well. It can be amazing. The thing that we have decided to really focus on is the active listening experience. So rather than just sitting with something in the background, it's okay, I'm going to tap in for 5 minutes and do this, I guess, therapeutic active listening experience that is hopefully going to help me achieve something that I'm in need of, such as better sleep or feeling, a little bit of relief if I'm going through grief or a heartbreak, for example.
And how do you find you coordinate musicians with psychologists and mental health practitioners? How do you find the right matches between them? How do you organize it?
So what we would do is we pull together a pod of artists and practitioners. So it will be one or two songwriters. The songwriters are usually also the lyricists, but very occasionally it's been different. And then we'd have the instrumentalists, the producers, and then the obviously sound engineers, and then our mental health scientists. So we'd have one or two mental health scientists per pod. And the way they work is essentially like a silent co-writer. So if you were an artist that was working with Spoke, I would always say your challenge really is to be 100% yourself and not become a, I guess, wellness or not speak like you were a mindfulness or a wellness, it's and that's
Is accessibility and relatability, right? That's what you're trying to.
exactly.
So it is
And
about the genuine authenticity. I know it sounds redundant to repeat genuine authenticity, but I feel like it does need that qualification these days because the
yeah,
word authentic seems to have also been bandied about a lot, but has come to not mean that necessarily.
exactly. And you know what? It's actually quite a difficult challenge for because most of the artists we've worked with, they've never seen wellness or mental health guidance delivered in a different way. So they would think, oh, cool, I'm going to be involved in this mental health project. I need to now almost tap into what I think of when I think of a wellness practitioner.
Right.
And so I have to like help them unlearn that a little bit. And that isn't necessarily the case. And we're going to do it as if you're making your next album in the studio. And that's what makes it different. That's the reason we can tap into groups of people that our healthcare system can't tap into. That's where the impact comes from with our work. And so I didn't finish what I was saying earlier, music isn't just the sound, it's also the lyrics. But then it's also the identity and the culture on top of it. I don't just love this music because, yes, I love it because it sounds great and what it's saying has a meaning to me, but also there's something in it that I see an essence of myself in it, or an essence of my belief system, or there's, culture and identity of that. They are such strong compounds with the music we listen to. I mean, like every subculture that ever existed, there was music and certain artists or genres at the helm. So that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of what smoke does, and why I believe so deeply in the power and unfortunately a lot of the untapped power we are still dealing with when it comes to music for mental health.
How do you find the listeners? How do you reach your would-be listeners, those who are, as you said, underrepresented or feel alienated or just aren't able to access for whatever reason? You have this product. Now, how are they getting to find out about you?
Yeah, so the app itself and the digital product, we've done quite a lot of work online with our socials, working with the right ambassadors, influencers, that kind of thing. So we now have some contracts with local councils where we work with schools and with youth clubs. So that's been really exciting because then it's really helped us see how change can be made on a much more systemic scale to, us and our tech startup trying to market to the masses, which frankly is really, really hard because, it's been a challenging startup journey, raising money to then spend marketing costs to try and attract people to fight against the masses of noise in the space. It's very difficult and very expensive reaching people. So you have to then, raise quite a lot of money to do that. So I'm taking a little bit of a change in strategy to figure out some better ways of reaching our target audience. But for now, it's a lot of it has frankly been word of mouth.
Speaking of the founder journey and the challenges of that's exactly what I wanted to ask you next, and how it's been for you, and
Yeah.
how do you manage the stresses and the challenges of being a founder in tech, a woman, um, culturally diverse, many different sort of hurdles and challenges within those few words. How do you manage your own mental and emotional well-being? And is music a part of that for you? Has it been historically as well?
I don't know. I have started to think that being an entrepreneur is it's like a gift and a curse. It's maybe like a certain personality type that can both, it's like I can physically handle this level of uncertainty and chaos and madness. And at the same time, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it is something linked to like forms of neurodiversity. I'm not 100% sure, but I have to go into quite immersive practices in order to really look after my mental health. I think because, in order to actually create stuff and to get things out into the world, it takes so much mental and emotional labor. But yeah, I frankly have found it quite a challenge to not get extremely anxious or have like the ups and downs throughout this journey.
Have you heard of the silk hair wrap company Paradise Fold? I've been using their 100% silk double-layered reversible wraps and turbans for years. And if you love your hair, I think you're really gonna love these too. Beautifully designed, snug, and luxurious, they're the ticket to hydrated, healthy, frizz-free hair. Third Culture Therapy podcast listeners get a special 10% discount on the Paradise Fold website with the code TCT10.
I have to ask then, given that you are half Iranian and you listen to all sorts of music, what did you think about Ed Sheeran's Azizem album?
So
Did
so
you
funny.
are you in camp appreciate or appropriate?
Oh, you know what? I have to say, and I can actually say this, on behalf of all my family, my Iranian side of the family as well. I don't really know any Iranians who are not happy or not appreciative of it. I think the way he went about it was quite sensitive and with an appreciation of Persian culture, and it's kind of fun. Like when I first heard the song, I'm going to be honest, I thought, what is this? Like, this is not a good song.
Then it's like you found yourself listening to it like 15 times a day. Like,
I know.
that's a classic Ed Sheeran song, isn't it? That's just
I know, and then you just see Ed Sheeran, like, sing, and you're just like, "This is so insane and ridiculous." It's actually fine, and it's good, and I think a lot of Iranians felt very seen
yeah.
as well because he's so famous. So yeah, I am in camp. It's
It's good.
it's good, it's good, it's fine.
You just sort of I'm glad to hear that. Also, I think it's sort of it just in many ways I think reaffirms what you're saying about the power of music. Obviously, he didn't do this with maybe perhaps all the understanding and nuances and expertise of mental and emotional health and the wording, etc. But it's clear that we know feeling appreciated, seen, and heard, especially when you are from an ethnic minority, and regardless of whether or not you're from the global majority, but in particular spaces and places where you're not, and where there is one or a dominant negative narrative around your culture, how that is going to impact you and your sense of self. And also showcase a part of their culture that while they know has been so integral or like is beautiful, like they haven't had this opportunity to share more widely, particularly in the Western world. So, hey, well done, Ed.
Yeah, well done, Ed. You did a good job, and you used a great word as well, as is others words that, it's such a lovely, beautiful word that we use a lot. And it came at a good time because obviously,
Yes.
Western sentiment towards Iran is simply like, well, it hasn't been good for a really long time for all kinds of political reasons.
What's your connection with Iran growing up? You're obviously half half. But did you used to go a lot, visit? Yeah.
Yeah, I've not been a huge amount, but I have been a number of times, and I absolutely adore going there. I've got a passport, still have family there, and I mean, I just wish everybody could go. What I love seeing is, to be honest, I love on Instagram seeing these fairly random Western travelers, and actually, especially American travelers who like so it's like some guy, I just can't remember his name, but he's from like the deep south, like Texas, deep south kind of American guy, and he's traveling all over the world, and he's literally in Iran chatting to people, eating food on the streets, dancing, like going to like a lot of the underground, music gigs and arts exhibitions, and there's so much going on. It's absolutely incredible, and he's just talking so beautifully about his appreciation of the country, and he's like, "Oh, I want more Americans to be able to just come here and experience this because your mind will be completely changed. What you think you know about Iran and Iranians, it is completely wrong." And it's nice seeing that affirmed because it's obviously something that myself and lots of people do know, but I'd find myself having to tell that to people sometimes, and they'd be like, "Oh, really? Oh, okay. I'd be too scared. I didn't know, fine. Aren't they just all a bunch of like, ooh."
Yeah. Is that how it was for you growing up? Like explaining, did you feel that you were having this sort of explanation or giving this explanation a lot to people?
Yes. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. And I think, at the end of the day, we have grown up in the UK where there is a dominant narrative. We have an education system that doesn't teach certain things. People, and especially, I was like 11 years old when like 9/11 happened, and then all this war on terror. So everyone that was a teenager sort of then got very conditioned that, Muslim countries were the enemy. And that's just the narrative that we've seen in our upbringing here. And I don't think, and obviously we've seen that playing out in real time over the past couple of years, but I don't think it's easy to unlearn some of those things. And that's, I think, the challenge that so many people have been going through. And thankfully, a lot of people have gone through that challenge and they've come out the other side to realize, okay, what I thought I know maybe isn't what was true. But yeah.
Culturally speaking, I feel like, particularly when it comes to matters of mental health, emotional conversations, and well-being, you couldn't get more polar opposites than the English and the Iranian. On the one hand, very sort of stiff upper lip, repressed, and reluctant to speak about emotions. On the other side, the birthplace of Rumi and poetry and like I'll gush my heart out and cry and music and drama and all of that. Are you impacted by one side more than the other?
Really amazing. I love this question just because this is the contradiction of my entire life. And this is why maybe so little makes sense most of the time. It's true, British and Iranian cultures, they are so, so, so different. And it's amazing that my parents have been together for 40 years. It's really nice.
40 years, well done.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. But like, wow, there's such drastic differences. But then what I've noticed is there's a couple of really strong similarities. So, for example, both Iranian and British cultures are very high context cultures. So they really value things like hospitality, and high context essentially means that you don't necessarily always say what you mean, but you understand the nuances of what someone means by the way they say it. So there are all these kind of like subtleties that, if you haven't spent a long amount of time in Britain, I think people might find quite difficult to understand because like German, American are quite low context cultures, which means they're very good at business and things like that. They're good at efficiency and all of these other very important things, but they really say what they mean. So there is no, twinkling around the bush or whatever you call it.
That famous, cheat sheet. I don't know if you've seen it doing the rounds on socials where there's like a list of English phrases. But then it's like what they actually mean. Like some of them are the complete opposite of what you've actually literally read.
Yeah.
And nothing to do with what they really mean.
Exactly. And you can imagine how confusing that might be for, certain cultures coming to Iran or to England. A really funny example that a lot of Iranians might tell you about is, I don't know if you know the concept of like Tarof.
I do. I was about to bring that up. I was like, I'm sure she's going to bring that up.
Everyone brings it up. But yeah, like there's an example of like an American guy. He gets off the airport in Tehran. He's in a taxi. He's really getting on with the taxi driver. When the taxi driver drops him off, he's like about to pay, and the taxi driver goes, "Oh no, it's fine. Don't worry." And the American guy's like, "Oh, thank you." And it's like, to someone who is, I'm going to be honest, Iranian, maybe, or British, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Give the man the money. Like there's no argument about this. Obviously he didn't mean. And then Americans would be like, or they might be like, well, why did he say it then if he didn't mean it? And it's like, look, this is just
poor guy.
This is the way it is. This is the dance that we
There's a dance. Exactly.
Hey, are you enjoying this episode? Well, let us know. In fact, better yet, let others know by sharing the show with them. Follow Third Culture Therapy Pod on Instagram, YouTube, and Substack, and listen to the show on all the usual channels. Now, where were we?
When you did your research on music, did you also delve into Iranian music and maybe some of its history and impact And did you want to incorporate any of it into?
I would have loved to. I would. I guess because my research time frame was very short and it was just a master's as well, so I couldn't go into as much depth maybe as I would have. That's a really beautiful, beautiful Persian song that uses a lot of metaphors around love and some of the Sufi mystic wisdom. And it's really about the soul's liberation from fear. And it's just about how to have true liberation and to live without fear, that is the ultimate goal. And that's what love is really all about. And, this particular song makes me think so much about how in our society, most of us are living in so much fear. And what are we fighting for? Like, what is all of this mental health work, therapeutic work, wellness work? What's it even for? And yeah, I personally think my purpose with it anyway is to try and help myself at least feel liberated, and also try and design ways to help other people feel liberated, like they're not completely burdened by the fears of, oh,
I mean, yes, that leads me to talk about that. I mean, you talk about how much we're living in fear, but you are, in my mind, quite a fearless person, and someone who has activism very much part and parcel at the core of your character, and social justice issues are very much um, a concern of yours. Obviously, we've spoken about that in the context of your professional life at Spoke, the company you founded, but you're also vocal on other social justice issues, particularly right now, one of the most pressing issues of our time, which is Palestine. And that has come, we've discussed, with its own challenges for you. Where does your sense of wanting to fight for these causes, and where does your fearlessness in that regard come from, do you think?
could be partly my personality type and why I'm even an entrepreneur in the first place. Because for some reason, I am willing to do, well, quote unquote, take risks or do things despite fears around them, because I feel, and when I know in my heart something's the right thing to do, I don't mind the backlash or the whatever sacrifice whatever sacrifice I have to make. So it is partly that. But I think there's a lot of people who also know what the right thing is, but again, they are completely chokeholded with fear of social repercussions, their work career repercussions, and those things completely take precedent over what I would call doing the right thing. Like, it shouldn't be seen as a abnormal thing for somebody to be fighting for what's actually objectively right. It shouldn't be unusual. It shouldn't be even like, it can be respected, but it shouldn't be whatever heralded as like they're so different. No, like, people should just do the right thing in the face of injustice. And I do believe that we have a moral obligation to either fight for what's right, if we can't fight in any way, to speak up and say things and encourage and share the messages. And yeah, I have probably always had a sense of that. And I think that there are just obviously some issues that, because I know more about and I have always known about, I found a lot quicker to activate and take a stand than maybe other people who didn't understand what was going on. And I was angry in that time, like, how dare you? Why don't you know? And then I realized that it took them 6 months or so to understand something that I knew my whole life.
Yeah.
So
It's not just a question of knowledge. I mean, of course, that's a part of it. Knowledge and awareness, access to information. But there's also, I think, certain maybe values that some people have, some people don't, certain narratives that people, subscribe to and don't. But then on top of that, and what's relevant, particularly in this context, as a businesswoman, as a founder, it are the consequences. that action or being vocal on particular topics, notably today on Palestine, have. Have you faced consequences professionally or otherwise as a result of your activism or your being vocally supportive of the Palestinian liberation movement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, someone, I think it was the founder of Zaytoon, the olive oil, brand, he put it in a really good way. He said, right now there's a rightful boycott of Israel. But up until this point, we've had a boycott of Palestine. We haven't known we've boycotted Palestine, but we have. And it's happened underneath most people's radar. So I never knew that, there were certain people I was deep in business with who actually are pretty hardcore, still to this day, supporters of Israel. I made an active decision. I was not going to work with anybody who either, any funds that there are, and once again, I can link these in the show notes for any entrepreneurs. But there are a lot of VCs who signed the letter of support for Israel, and they have maintained that signature. Numerous VCs, actually some of the biggest in the world that are quote unquote the most respected, they have invested in some of the technology, AI, that are weapons manufacturers that are currently committing atrocities in Gaza. As founders who are building successful businesses, we need to be cognizant of where the money is coming from, because our success means their success, but times 10. So we are making them wealthier and them more successful and more respected by us being successful. So it's so important who our partners are, who are where our funds come from, basically who we're in bed with from a business perspective. And yeah, there's a lot of people who just simply either flat out disagreed and they said, no, I don't think that's true, that they didn't want to listen, or they just haven't really understood why it's incredibly important. And I think that again comes from the fact they maybe don't, or they didn't truly understand what was going on. They maybe are numb, dissociated. I don't know what it is, but I faced a huge amount of backlash from other founders within the community. And
What's that? I mean, speaking of taking the money or not taking it, you mentioned earlier that there were a couple of reasons why people maybe didn't, within the founder community, weren't receptive to what you had to say. I mean, is that also a question of they want the money?
yeah, I think it was.
There aren't other sources.
Look, it definitely is more challenging. And to an extent, I have managed, but actually at a major financial sacrifice.
Let's say we're talking to people within this space who maybe don't have this sort of experience and strong sentiment that you have, but who still would like to be a bit more on the right side of,
Yeah.
or maybe their conscience is prickling them and they'd like to do something. What would you suggest to them as a practical, low risk, higher integrity step they could take towards that?
So, if you're an entrepreneur, the first thing I would suggest is join Entrepreneurs for Palestine. Just go on entrepreneursforpalestine.com, sign up, join the community. There are some of the biggest, most successful founders in the world in this community, multiple unicorn founders, investors from some of the biggest funds. This got set up in conjunction with Tech for Palestine a little while ago, and it is the best entrepreneurial community I've actually ever been part of. So within the community, there is a whole project called Investors for Palestine, which is people from all over the investment community, VCs, family offices, you name it, who are actively working together to build an ecosystem away from the dominant systems. So that's a really great place to start, because then you'll meet the right people and you'll be able to build relationships with people that at least are values aligned. So And I think the first thing really is just to surround yourself with people that are also in business and who feel the same way, because then you create partnerships, you create funding opportunities, business opportunities together. And the whole, really now I think a positive thing that a lot of us are trying to do is build this ecosystem of success and wealth and prosperity that is really strongly aligned to humanity, the values that we care about, Palestinian liberation. And
Absolutely. I might add, I mean, yes, Palestine, I think, is the, obviously the very pressing concern of our today, but
it's
when you're talking about value aligned and
yeah,
principles and the issues that underpin what is happening in Palestine today are relevant to several other very pressing
absolutely.
global social issues. And
Exactly. And what we've learned is that, people who are cognizant and care about Palestinian liberation, they 10 times out of 10, they also care about environmental issues. They care about social equity and prosperity.
but also very relevant to our topic within the wellness industry, mental health. Oof, that has quite the disappointment,
Oh.
I would say, as someone you, I think, would probably agree, right?
Oh my gosh, I could not agree more. I mean, the wellness, I guess spirituality, even whatever you call it, sector has been the absolute one of the biggest disappointments. I just and I do think it's because, within Western society, we we have such an individualist lens of our well-being. And obviously, even like therapy, the way we do it's so important, but it's only a proven model as well in the West. That's why I love a lot of the work around liberation psychology and looking at through a real kind of collective lens. And I think as well, what's happening, at least what I've noticed is happening, we're sort of at this point right now, which is mass global awareness. More people we're in the belly of the beast in the US and Europe. There has been more mass awakening as to what's been going on for a very long time than we've ever had in history. So it's like now we've got all these people who are angry, who are awake and aware, and that's growing and that's happening and that's great. What I think we don't understand as much in the West is we haven't learned about how true liberation movements have succeeded. In our school, we haven't learned like revolution theory that, a lot of other people will just understand that in order to succeed with certain liberation movements, there's all this different work that needs to be done and a whole spectrum of, roles that people have. After all this awareness, you kind of step into this work that has to happen. And then we hopefully get to a place where things feel a little bit better. And I feel like within the world of wellness, maybe because people haven't understood the trajectory, they've satellited straight from the awareness and the anger all the way to all we need is just peace, love, and light. And then if everyone,
Oh, yeah, the classic, the spiritual bypassing.
yeah, no, if everyone,
There's a lot of that going on.
exactly, like if everyone could just, peace out and love each other, and I feel for the sentiment because I think they really mean.
Do you think that they do really mean that? There's the genuineness to that? Because you and I in our earlier discussion, we spoke about how the wellness industry is full of like wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
And I'm in two minds about, I guess, depending on how gracious I'm feeling, I'm either with you, what you just said, but then there's another part of me is like, well, are you really that dense? Are you? Because I don't how can you have gone into the space genuinely and thoroughly enough and come out with this conclusion? So I don't know what, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you because I have and I do oscillate quite a lot. I think there are some people in the space that simply don't know anything else than this must be all we need. I'm just going to try and promote this message, and they make business out of that as well. They make good money about selling their manifestation courses and this and that. But I think there are other people who they have big book deals with,
It's a thing because wellness has become such a big and lucrative industry now, hasn't it? And so, how can we spot these people? How can
oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult. I think what you said really relates to just the real pursuit of ego as well. And it's like this is capitalism. Instead of having, it's all about how do I reach that top 0.01%? Because capitalism, the industry of it, and ego is all put into it, they, you know, even if they are a good person and they want a good to put out a good message, they feel like in order to be successful, they have to beat the algorithms by really focusing on a certain narrative, by getting these certain benchmarks so that they can reach this top 1%, so that they can have a say. And that's what I see in the founder and the startup world as well. They're like, well, I'm just not going to say anything, and I'm just going to take the money that I can get and the partnerships I can get.
And the irony of it is it won't ultimately protect them in the long run. It's just like how much it's friend. It's disconnection, lack of empathy, isolation, denial. These are not things that are associated generally with long-term good mental and emotional well-being. So fine, you protected yourself now in the short term, but I think I can understand why it's tempting.
I think it's important to say this. We have a challenging few years ahead of us. And if we sit and put our head in the sand like, no, everything's good, don't get me wrong. Obviously, we need to have our breaks when we can. But I think we need to not understand that we've got a challenging few years ahead of us. And
putting our head in the sand isn't going to change that. We decide what our space and place and contribution can be, and to feel empowered to do that. I think this is also sometimes I keep wanting to tell people is like, don't disempower yourself so quickly.
And ultimately, the change that we're trying to make is like eroding a rock. We're slowly eroding a rock, and nobody can spend their entire time at the front of that wave being bashed up against the rock. Like those are the people who are, they're at the forefront in the trenches doing really, I guess, the radical work that needs doing. And then there are people in the back offices, shifting research, looking at policy changes, all of this stuff. And, and as a collective, the more people we can bring into the wave, sometimes we might be at the front of it, sometimes we might be at the back. And, I think it's so important that within every single industry, people are coming together and we're very, very organized and we're working together and we're all doing small bits and having the rest that we need between that as well. And knowing that, we're one molecule of water in this sea of change. We're not going to win it by our one brand or piece of work or this and that. The straw that will break the camel's back will be on top of probably millions of other pieces of work and actions that have been taken before it. The power of community and creating that kind of experience is at the forefront of all of it. So I look forward to you.
Well, we'll share all of those links that you mentioned, and also obviously links to Spoke. And thank you so much, Ariana, for your time, for sharing all of your wisdom, your experience, your passion. And yes, I look forward to speaking again with you in a year's time, seeing where Spoke is.
Thanks so much, Layla.
I would love it if you would like, follow, and review this episode. And please share it far and wide with friends, family, colleagues, the lot. Every little click from you helps elevate this podcast, allowing me to carry on producing great content for you.